called up on my phone straight away and said, I'm interested in buying your property. I didn't have the money, obviously didn't have the experience.
That's the best way.
Didn't know what I was doing, but I know I needed a deal.
You got to have the drive, and you think, I got to find a way. So he didn't know he was sitting on potentially a gold mine. You did. You looked at this and saw something completely different.
Yeah, exactly. Got it built, let. It was fully let, refinanced, and I cried.
Right.
I cried because it took so many years. I feel emotional now.
Yeah.
It took so many years of like grit and graft, and sometimes, cash was tight.
Yes. And you've been developing in Birmingham for quite some time now. So how much have you developed? What sort of quantity numbers have you been doing?
Flat wise, we've got we're on our working on our 4th new build development.
Okay.
But flat wise, we're probably up to 250 flats or something.
Wow. So 250 units.
Student.
It's pretty much student stuff. That's what you specialize in. That's what you've been doing for some time.
Yeah. So students is where I started out. I started a lettings business.
Yeah.
Student lettings business. So it's my natural next step just to jump into student development. But our pipeline's got co-living and build to rent and some other stuff. So over the next couple of years, some of the non-student stuff will be developed.
That's in Birmingham as well.
Birmingham and surrounding Birmingham as well, wider Midlands.
Right. So we first met, I was trying to work out 12, 13 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
If not longer. And student lettings is what you were doing at the time. So what was the transition from letting rooms to building massive developments for them?
What do you mean by what was the transition?
How did you transition from that? So many people are probably thinking, how do you go from a letting agent to developing huge buildings?
Yeah. Do you know what? I've been asked this before a few times, and I always say, do you know what? There's no transition. There was not a transition. I had to stop one and do the other one. It's like going from riding a bike to driving a car. It's like totally different. You don't transition from a bicycle or a motorbike to a car.
It's like stop and start.
Stop. Yeah, it's just a fresh start.
Yeah.
So I had to learn from scratch. Everything from, and I learned as I went along. The first thing I needed to do was find a development site.
Yeah.
And so I went out there looking for, specifically looking for sites that I thought would be appropriate to build student accommodation, new build sites. So I went out there, parked my car up, started hitting the streets, walking around. And that's what I did. I found a site, contacted the owner and said, I've seen your site. Found the owner details online, by the way. They had a sign in the window, to rent sign.
Yeah.
Called the owner
him directly.
Called up on my phone straight away and said, I'm interested in buying your property. I didn't have the money, obviously didn't have the experience.
That's the best way.
Didn't know what I was doing, but I know I needed a deal.
You got to have the drive, and you think, I got to find a way.
That's it.
Yeah.
So what I did know is that I needed a deal, and I needed to move on from being a lettings agent. And took it from there. That's the short explanation. Yeah.
And so talk me through what the experience like was the first one. How long did that take from when he says, okay, we've got a deal, to starting the developing and trying to fund something like that, planning?
So that first deal, funnily enough, is not the first one that I built.
Okay.
Because there were some delays. Anyway, but that property I found walking the street again. In fact, no, actually, I was on a viewing of a property next door. Whilst viewing that property, I looked out and saw this property available.
Yeah.
But it was around that period where I was walking streets, finding stuff. Found the owner's contact number, called him up, told him that I wanted to buy the property, got a number out of him, how much he wanted for the property. Then my next step was to find an architect to try and get some kind of feasibility done. And you know what? I did not know the difference between a planning consultant and an architect. That's how little I knew. I thought a planning consultant could carry out the duties of an architect. I had no idea. So I contacted one of the first people I contacted was the planning consultant.
Okay.
I said, I've got this scheme, this is what I want to do. And then he listed out all these consultants I'd need and all these fees for a planning application. And one of the people he listed was an architect, and I thought you were the architect. So that I didn't know. Found an architect firm, sent them the site and said, here's the site, here's the address, here's the site plan that I downloaded from Land Registry, how much accommodation I build on it. And they came back with this sort of block plan and said, these are the kind of units that we think you can build on this site based on an all self-contained studio scheme.
Right.
And then I worked backwards from there. I worked out what rent I could charge for those studios because I was in the student market. I understood what kind of rent I could get. And then I worked out by speaking to developers and people I knew from being a lettings agent, I worked out what it would cost me to build.
Yeah.
And I worked backwards. So I worked out values, what then it would be valued based on the rental income. Then I worked out the development costs, and then that gave me the land value. And so it worked out fine. So 10 months later, we got planning permission on it. I partnered up with one of my clients on that deal. We went 50-50 on it, paid equal amount for the planning permission.
Yeah.
Must have cost, it was outline planning, must have cost 60 or 70 grand.
Wow.
So I just funded that from my business. But I didn't have money to buy the property. My business partner had the cash to buy it, so he bought the property.
Okay.
And we were 50-50. Took 10 months to get planning permission. And
had he had experience with these kind of projects?
yeah, he was a developer.
Okay.
He was a developer. And that was one of the things I wanted to do. I wanted to partner with someone experienced. I did all the work, mind you. So I did, and I wanted to do all the work. I did all the work related to the planning application, getting all the reports together.
So that's where the learning
the team
is.
I learned, hands-on. I wanted to do it. Even though we were at that point 50-50 in terms of the money. So we were on an equal standing, but I did all the work because I wanted to learn. And we got planning 10 months later. And that land value jumped from, we bought the property for, we had agreed to buy it for 400 grand. The value jumped to over £1 million.
Wow. So that planning approval to be able to build the development took that value up 600 grand by making that 60 odd grand investment, taking it through the planning process. And there was still a risk there. There was no guarantee you were going to get the outcome.
Nope.
They could have turned around and chopped it right down and said, no, it's got to be much smaller. But you took it step by step. And then I guess at that point, it becomes much easier to fund it because the sites were significantly more compared to what you've got to pay for it. So just for those listening or watching, to be clear, you didn't purchase it at the beginning. You would have agreed to buy, i.e. getting control over it, then go away, get the planning, get the uplifting value, then move forward to the next step.
Correct. So the actual arrangement was an option agreement. So it's basically we were allowed an exclusive period of time, but not the obligation to buy this property. However, the seller is obligated to sell during that period. And so we, I think, what did was put down? It's a bit of a blur now. I think it was about 5 grand I put down as this. And I've done other deals. I've put down £1.
Yeah.
This isn't always the case. In other deals, I've put down £1 grand. But this one, we put down 5 grand and had an option to buy the site. And then when it came time, we got planning permission. It came time to complete on the purchase. The seller tried to back out of the deal.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah, he did. Tried to back out of the deal. The really interesting thing about that seller as well was he was Birmingham based.
Right.
The property was in Birmingham.
Yeah.
He had a refurbishment that he was doing in Ireland.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On a little refurbishment on a house.
Oh,
and it was causing him a massive issue and a massive ball ache.
So it wasn't even a big development. It's just a little house refurb he was doing.
House refurb, but he was having a nightmare with the builders.
Yeah.
That was taking up a lot of his time and it was like draining him. And the whole time he owned a property that had that potential to do.
Yes.
It's
amazing sometimes. Well, it's easy to say it's difficult sometimes to see the wood from the trees, but often we don't know what we don't know. So he didn't know he was sitting on potentially a gold mine. You did. You looked at this and saw something completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought, what could I do with this?
It's great. It's like The Alchemist, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the opportunity was right there.
Yes.
And he was out there in another country.
Yes.
Doing a deal that was causing him an issue when he already owned the asset.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he tried to pull out, and then we just served notice on him for non-performance, and he kind of got his act together then when we got solicitors involved.
Realise he has to get it done.
Complete. Yeah, we were within our rights to purchase the property, and we bought it, and then had to go through that process then of getting a contractor and getting development financing lined up.
At what point did you celebrate?
Celebrate? God, I don't think I've ever celebrated that. To be honest,
I suspected that may have been the case. Often people that are graft, they just get their head down, and then as soon as that bit's, they move on to the next and move on to the next thing, and not pausing to celebrate. Do you think it's important to enjoy the moment, though?
I think it is. That there was my first new build development that I finished, big one in 2021. When we got same thing, found the site, got an option, got planning permission on it. There was delays, planning permission got a builder, got it developed, got the development financing all in place, got it built, let. It was fully let, refinanced, and I cried.
Right.
I cried because it took so many years. I feel emotional
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
It took so many years of like grit and graft, and sometimes, cash was tight.
Yes.
And things were hard. And so when it got to that stage where I was able to refinance, it was like, I've done it now. Like it's on a mortgage and investment loan. It was like a weight off my shoulders.
Yes.
So I didn't celebrate, but it was a relief.
Yeah.
But that was only at the point we exited because the pressure was on the whole time.
Often developments can look really attractive and, a strategy is going to make you rich, but people don't realize that it could be months, if not years of graft with no pay and a reward at the end.
Yeah. If it works out, you get a reward. Sometimes that reward doesn't come after all the years of graft.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to have multiple deals. You've got to have multiple deals going, and you've at some point you've got to try and pay yourself because you're not guaranteed where that ends up.
You can't live on fresh air.
You can't live on that, so you've got to try and extract cash where you can without jeopardizing the deal or the company. So I've still not celebrated, but it was emotional.
And then I guess that gave you enormous amounts of confidence after the first one. You've got the planning. First of all, it's a kind of getting the deal agreed, getting the option signed, getting the planning approval, starting the build. All these are massive milestones. And at each point, your confidence level must be growing that actually, okay, this is possible, I can do this. And approaching second, third, fourth sites, much easier at that point?
Yeah, do you know what? I've never had a confidence issue, and I've never had a kind of can I do it kind of thing. I've always had like a high form of self-belief. I've always thought, if that's been done, I can do it. It doesn't matter who it is. And so when it was nice validation. And that's one thing I like. I like to prove things to myself. I'm not really interested in proving things to others or proving people wrong. That's never been anything that makes me tick. It's proving myself right. And so that was good validation. Getting the first one and getting planning permission on that helped. But whilst that was in planning, I was out doing other deals. So I wasn't waiting for that to go through. I started doing other deals, and then cash got tight. Then I had to start taking in more partners,
right?
Because I couldn't afford it. Couldn't afford to. Planning applications are expensive. Best case scenario on a larger deal is 50 grand.
Yeah,
that's a fairly cheap one, to be fair.
Yeah.
These days, I'm not really doing anything that's less than 100 grand on a planning application.
So just break that down for somebody that might be listening and understand, thinking, how can you spend 50 grand on planning?
It's crazy.
Are architects that expensive? Because there's lots of components. So break that down for us.
There's lots of components. If I think about a deal that we're doing right now, we're doing a 220 bed. It's another student accommodation scheme. The architect fees on that must be, so by the way, I've got a few projects, so this is roughly it. I'm going to say the architect fees on that might be 45,000, 50,000 pounds. This is for the planning application. This isn't for detailed design and drawings once you get your planning permission. This is just the architect fees, just to get us planning permission. And then you've got to pay for all these other reports, like transport report. You've got to pay for ground investigation. You've got to pay for planning statement. And there's these various other reports and documents that you've got to put together to support this planning application. Might be a townscape assessment and some other heritage statements and other reports that you've got to put together.
So all these specialists are fees that need to be paid out.
Big fees.
In order to try and get planning approval.
In order just to pull it forward to the council to say,
consider it even.
Please take a look at my application. The process is kind of mad when you think about it. It's a very costly and very drawn out process, and it actually can be quite discouraging at times, to be honest, as a developer, when you're putting a lot of money and time into this and resource into these schemes. It's a bit mad. So you've got to obviously do your due diligence and look at the site, assess it, get advice, get professional advice in, make sure you've got your developer hat and you're working out what other constraints there could be with the site. Anything from in terms of ground risks to development risks to neighbourly matters like party wall issues, oversell license and oversell agreement. So you've got to try and, when you're reviewing a site, just take that all into consideration and do an assessment, and then work out whether it's the plunge. Is it worth that, what you've agreed for the land plus that planning risk? Obviously, if you're going to get if you're going to take that planning risk, there's got to be a nice healthy gain
Yes.
at the point you get planning.
Because there's a fair bit of risky taking at that
There's
point.
a risk.
And that's why the reward, the uplifting value is so high.
That's why there's such a value on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what anyone that's doing this needs to make sure that they've allowed enough fat in it to, if they need to exit at the point they get planning permission, make sure there's enough profit at that stage, because that is a lot of work within itself. That's a lot of time. It's not a 1 month process. It's not a 1 week process. It's a lot of time and resource to put that together. You want to be able to potentially exit at that point if you need to, and if not, you go on to then take it through to development, which is a whole nother ball game.
Yes.
Which is a whole nother ball game in itself.
So before we get on to working with the builders and building out, how have you found the expectations of the site owners, the building owners, the landowners when you're having conversations with them? Because you're thinking, I'm putting a tower here. They're thinking, this is a gold mine I'm potentially sitting on. Have you found that negotiation process?
Everyone's sitting on a gold mine, aren't they?
Especially in Birmingham.
If they don't want $1 million, they want 2.
Yeah.
It can be, in some areas it can be very challenging. If you found a development site in a really hot area and everything else around it is developed, there's a 99% chance that landowners...
The reason it's not developed is because they want so much money for it.
There's a good chance it's that. There's a good chance they want a lot of money for that site. And so, yes, there's that complexity to it. You want to take that into consideration. But if you can find a site in an area that isn't as obvious, that can be a good strategy. So one that's potentially already allocated for development. Maybe it's in the SLA, in the local plan from the council. Or you've just spotted it as an opportunity as a site. They can be good deals. But again, even where there's... Also, the other thing to take into consideration on that same point, to be fair, is sometimes people just miss that site. That site can be sitting there the whole time.
Yeah.
Everyone else assumes there's a deal that's been done and nothing's been done.
Yes. Yeah.
And you go and contact that owner, and if the flip side does happen, and you get a fair price for that plot of land or whatever the site is. So either way, you just got to try it. But you do find landowners, the expectations generally can be quite high, especially in a city like Birmingham and central Birmingham. It can be quite challenging. But again, you've got to look at multiple deals, and eventually you'll find something or a few that work. And just like in normal residential and buy-to-let investment, you've got to pay the right price.
Yes. You've
got to make sure you're paying the right price going in, because that also helps to shelter you against other things that could come up later on, like, inflation, construction costs, and all those kind of
There's
things.
There's going to be unforeseens.
There's always unforeseens. It gets a bit mad.
So let's talk about the big unforeseen then. COVID and lockdown.
Yeah, COVID got a bit crazy. Yeah. We had a lender pull the plug on us.
Actually pull the plug?
Yeah, just as we were about to start.
Wow. I had one that got very nervous on me with quite a lot of money. We saw it through, but didn't pull the plug.
God. Oh, so you've done well there. So no, we had one pulled just before we started, so we hadn't drawn down, but everything was agreed. We were just in legals. Everything was signed off, full credit back terms and the rest of it. And so we had to scramble at that point. It was a student scheme. We had to scramble and found another lender, and that worked out fine, fortunately. So we've since done another deal with that lender. What else has happened? A scheme that we've got under construction now, that was the increase in construction costs were absolutely bonkers. So we did a 2-stage tender from the point of getting the first price back from the contractor when they initially look at it in the first stage of the tender to getting to a point where you're actually able to enter into contract.
Yeah.
So this is at the point that contractors prepared to enter a fixed price contract and take the risk from that point. The price between that period was just crazy.
Materials pricing going up, and
I mean, it was like a I think it was almost a 7-figure increase in construction costs. It was mad. So it was the bill cost on that scheme is 7.8 million. So it jumped up to that figure by about £1 million. So that got a bit crazy. Fortunately, value has increased a bit during that period as well. So that helped us.
That didn't happen immediately. So there was a nervous time that the costs have gone up, but the values hadn't. The values kind of came up afterwards.
They came up after.
Yeah.
And even then they've increased a bit still. So we're sort of up now. But at the time you're like, shit, I need to sort this out, and you got to scramble. But I mean, there's loads of what other unforeseen. Oh, there's what else can I think of? There's loads of unforeseen.
Yes.
It can be obviously interest costs are
Yeah.
another obvious one. Interest rates that can put a lot of deals in jeopardy now because a lot of the banks that need a certain level of interest cover aren't able to get that because the amount of the cost of the debt now
Yes.
is too high for the rent or whatever the property is to cover that, to cover the servicing of the loan. So that's another big one. But
But
it's just about it's about your team and about how you react. It doesn't really kind of, in a way, it's almost doesn't matter what the hurdle is because it's going to happen.
You've got to have that mindset that it's not going to be a smooth journey. Whatever is going to get thrown at me, I'm just going to have to deal with it.
And that's why you have a good contingency. Make sure you do your due diligence beforehand to try and reduce the risks. It's never going to get rid of all the risk.
Yes.
Reduce it as much as you can. Have a contingency part, and keep your eye on the ball, and just be prepared to tackle it. I don't. When things happen like that, I don't panic.
Yeah.
I just try and gather all the people I need.
Yes.
That's going to help me with that issue. It's a team effort. What can we do here?
Yeah.
Bang,
and that's really important in that situation, to stay cool when everyone else is kind of stressed or panicked around you, because you need a cool, level-headed person to kind of see through that.
Definitely. There's panicking is not going to get you very far in especially when you need to make a decision quickly.
Yeah.
So some of the schemes that we're doing in the student schemes, they're time sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
We can't hang around for a month thinking about what we're going to do. We need to make a decision now. Otherwise, we can lose a whole year, academic year.
Which is a significant amount of money.
Which is crazy. On the schemes that we're doing, it's like we can multiple 7-figure deficit in relative to what you could have made. So it's crazy. But it's all part of the game, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
All part of the game.
Did we have a contractor that went bust on us both?
Yeah. God, don't say the name. It's like Voldemort, isn't it?
And how do you deal with that
funny
situation?
because I found out from someone that said, "Oh, Saj had that same contract." I was like, "Really?"
Yeah. I knew they were doing a few other jobs at the same time they were doing ours. I didn't realize they were doing one for you.
Yeah,
as well.
that was a big hit. They're not a good outfit. You could see the telltale signs, to be fair.
Yeah.
You could see the telltale signs. We tried to get out, but it's messy trying to get a
But
contract.
how can you mitigate those kind of situations? Because you look at a contract, you look at the experience, you look at the track record, and you think, okay, it looks like I've got a good one here.
That is a very good question, because with that contractor, we did DD on the contractor. We went to see their sites that they'd completed. They had a bunch of sites ongoing, and also the bank did their DD.
Yeah.
So the bank did their DD separately, and I had references from a developer who they had done a scheme for, student scheme, and I had a reference from a cost consultant that I knew.
Okay.
So I was pretty
So
comfortable.
they ticked all the boxes.
Ticked the boxes.
So on paper, it looked like,
Paper.
this is going to work.
Paper, it looked fine. I was like, yeah, this is good.
So you can't really mitigate for every eventuality. There's going to be things that are going to come up.
Yeah, I think in hindsight with them, I think the requirement probably should have been to have seen them completed more schemes. They had a few schemes under construction, and I think 1 or 2 that were completed, decent sized schemes, by the way. One of them at least was a lot bigger than the one we were doing. But I think in hindsight, just someone with I think potentially a completed finished track record, opposed to just this is what we're working on.
Yeah, loads of sites.
Because I think they took out a few schemes when they went down.
Yeah.
They took out at least decent sized schemes as well. Multiple.
I looked at their accounts when they went bumper, and it was a mess. The amount of money that they had owed all over the place. Yeah,
messy.
So in terms of the sites that you're looking at the moment, when you build out, you're looking to keep those, or you're selling them on, or are they all build to rent? Or
for now, our strategy is to build a portfolio, which isn't easy, but we're finding sites to either with planning permission already, or we get the planning ourselves, building them out and then renting them out. So student accommodation, residential apartment buildings, and co-living.
So you've got a model that works, student lettings. And the student market, you understand that, you've been doing it for years. Why start looking at something different like co-living? Or
I guess the answer to that's twofold. One, we started looking at around the same time. Funnily enough, the first new build development I did, initial intention was for an apartment scheme that I could sell the apartments.
Right.
So that the strategy sort of evolved. I see it as the same. Student accommodation to me is no different from doing a residential apartment building or co-living, because we're trying to provide, or we are providing a great product.
Yes.
And our team needs to provide a great service, which we like to think we do, at least, and keep residents happy, do community events, trying to encourage these residents to communicate with us. Hopefully they rebook. So it's a similar process. If you provide a great
the actual
product
product is the same. The occupants are different, i.e. students versus those who are working, but overall what your product's pretty much the same, I guess.
It's the same. So it's just, there are some, nuances. You want to, maybe a student needs a bit more face time, and they want a bit more support, and they want to feel a bit more comforted, and you're dealing with parents on occasion, whereas when you're dealing with professionals, young working professionals, you're unlikely to meet their parents, and they're need I say a little bit more. They've got a little bit more life experience, so their demands and needs are slightly different from some of the students.
Yeah,
and you've got to cater to that. Some of these students are, they're young and it's their first time living away from home.
Yes.
And so, they may not know how to work a washing machine.
Yeah.
And so with, I'm working
I'm smiling because we see some of those things,
You see those things. So for a working professional, their requirements can be quite different. Maybe they may not need that kind of support and may not be panicking saying, I can't wash my clothes sort of thing. So it's about tweaking it.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing.
And so how do you see the market is evolving then? So Birmingham's a very hot market.
Very hot.
And, prices seem very high right now. What do you think is the future for Birmingham city development?
Birmingham has some interesting plans. There's development's certainly going to continue in definitely, obviously, the centre. There's a lot of residential apartment schemes that are planned for the centre. That's going to continue to happen. We're looking for a lot more green space in the centre as well. So Birmingham, the council are looking to incorporate green space and a lot more sort of open areas, open space within schemes that they see come through into the city. So that will happen. Areas like Ladywood are going to be transformed in the next few years. And just as the city centre expands, basically, those areas that are on city centre, and people are going to be, the ones that live in those communities are sadly going to be pushed out.
Yeah.
It's just
how it works. It's going to become unaffordable.
100% it'll be unaffordable. And it's just where we are with build costs as well. So similar thing to our schemes, we have to charge a certain level of rent for the deal to work. So I would like for us to do slightly more affordable schemes, but it's just not viable. By the time you've paid for the land and paid for all the development costs, you've got to exit or have the value at a certain level in order to make it work. So the rents are going to be high. People will be driven out further out, but there are other areas in Birmingham that are coming up. What else is planned for Birmingham? What are the other opportunities? Commercial. There's definitely some scope for more A-grade office space in the centre. There's a new scheme on Colmer Road, 103 Colmer Road. The letting seems to have gone really well there. That's gone down quite well. More businesses are coming to the city, aren't they? HSBC, MasterChef have setting up their studio in Digworth.
We seem to have been a bit slow catching up. With Manchester seems to have overtaken us in terms of amount of development and stuff. But we seem to be kind of catching up a little bit more now and taking place for the second city.
Well, Commonwealth Games helped. I met the there's a organisation in Birmingham that is set up to help encourage investment into Birmingham. So I met that organisation recently, and it was interesting just hearing about some of the things that they've been instrumental in. Like they're the ones that helped to get HSBC here. They bid for the Commonwealth Games, and so there are a lot of things that are being done actively to try and promote investment. So it's going to increase. Prices are high, but it follows the trend of a lot of other big cities and centres where the prices are higher and people usually live further out. If they want something a bit more affordable.
So do you see yourself doing more of the same in the next few years, or do you think you'll evolve from what you're doing into other things?
We'll definitely do more of the same at a slightly bigger scale. We've got, some of the projects we're doing now that we're working on are fairly sizable, but we'll continue to that scale. And houses,
Yeah.
do you know, as a development company, when I set up my new company a few years ago, Volume Property, I was very intentional about not having anything student related in the name,
Okay.
because I always knew we weren't going to just do
Yes.
student
Yeah.
accommodation. So I think there's always some degree of flexibility there. If we came across some 500 acres that is suitable for family houses, and we've got a great exit lined up, and there's let's say there's a planning
Yeah.
that's already looking positive, then we'll do that deal.
Yeah.
And so I think I say sometimes, oftentimes it can be site specific and site led.
Yes.
So if we have a nice site that seems to us to lend itself really well for build to rent, and later on we find out it's more appropriate for a commercial office building, then on the basis we've got a really good exit, i.e. either someone lined up to buy it, or we've got some really good occupants that can take out long-term leases on that to de-risk it, then we'll do the deal. So I think there's definitely going to be some flexibility.
Yes.
Just needs to be at scale, because you know what it's like. It's same work. There's a £5 million deal compared to a £20 million deal.
Your effort, skill, team, infrastructure pretty much is all the same. It's just you're creating a different end product, but the people, the team, everything will be the same. The skills that you require pretty much the same.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
So we're a deal we're working on right now is a big student accommodation scheme, over 300 beds. I was talking to the bank about this, one of the banks we work with, and he said, "Oh, that's a big scheme, isn't it?" I was like, "Well, it's no different from any other scheme that we do. I know that the whole team does the same.
Yes.
The same team I have on my projects is exactly the same team that do these size projects.
Yes.
So it just makes no difference to anything really, other than some extra zeros and a bit more work for the contractor."
Yes. Yeah. What's a zero on the end of things?
Yeah, what's a zero? What's a zero between friends, between banks?
Yeah. So
yeah.
what gives you the biggest buzz then in terms of what you're doing?
Buzz, I like doing deals.
The deal making.
The deal making, that's my biggest. That bit I enjoy the most. I like going around site and seeing the construction side of things and seeing it develop over time.
Yeah.
I like, happy residents.
Yes.
And seeing them enjoy the building, and sometimes I'll get feedback, and even, you wouldn't believe it, yesterday I bumped into a tenant when I was with the bank, and she was explaining how much she loved the building. It was like a setup.
Yeah.
I turned to the guy at the back, I was like, "Look, I promise you that was not a setup." She was just raving about it.
Yes.
And raving about our colleagues and everyone else in the building.
That's always nice to hear.
It was amazing to hear, especially to the right people as well.
Yes.
The ones that want to hear that feedback. So the deal making is a bit that I find the most enjoyable. I like doing the other bits, like walking around site and looking at the site develop during construction.
It's the deal making that gives me the biggest buzz.
Same
way
thing.
above everything else.
It's just
that excitement of getting that deal
there.
done.
You know, like there's a hurdle, and you're just trying to get that point to, get it to a point where everyone agrees, and you get that contract signed.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I need to do my next deal now.
Yeah.
Like, what's your favorite deal?
My favorite deal.
It's usually the new one, isn't it?
Yeah. The next one. It's the one I'm working on now.
It's the new deal is usually my favorite deal. So
yeah. What's a typical day look like for you now then?
Typical day these days, it's working a lot more on deals now. So I'm doing a bit more of what I wanted to do for a little while. So I've got an investment analyst that I work quite closely with. So he does the initial DD on stuff, and we're just reviewing deals and putting out offers.
Appraising the deals to see.
Well, he appraises deals, we get it in, and then we just start trying to put the deal together with funders and also landowners.
Yes.
So I'm doing a lot more of that these days, and usually during the week I usually catch up with the ops team. So we manage our accommodation in house. So we usually catch up there, see where we are with lettings for the following year. See where we are with lettings right now, see where we are with finance, rent collection, that sort of thing. And also then keeping tabs on where we are on all the projects we have. So usually on a planning application, we normally have a planning consultant involved that acts as sort of the project manager agent. So it's just catching up with them. And then every site that we have under construction, we always have a project management firm, separate company as PM and a separate quantity surveyor, and then we hold them to account. And that's pretty useful because it allows us to spend more time doing other stuff. So I guess I think that's more my typical day, really. It's just really seeing what everyone else is up to and then doing a bit more on the deal stuff that I enjoy.
With universities, they're not building any more of them, but there seems to be more and more accommodation being built for the students. Do you think we might be hitting a saturation point, or?
In central Birmingham is probably a few thousand beds off saturation in the next few years, but then it's set to increase again as numbers increase.
But do you think that's because there's more students, or do you think that's because the accommodation being taken away from other places like your traditional student HMOs and stuff?
It's mainly down to more students. There's more students in the city. There is some older stock that's going to go out, but it'll be replaced. But it's mainly new influx of students. It's a busy city, 80,000 students. A lot of students.
You're still a young guy, and in terms of if you could roll the clock back and have your time again, what would you do differently, do you think?
In business, I would say I'd dream bigger, start sooner. I'd do some of what I've done the same. So I'd partnered up with someone that was experienced. I would have done it sooner. I actually tried to do a deal in my second year of university.
Okay.
Me and funnily enough, a development deal. It's just funny how it comes back full circle. It was this big site that is now student accommodation, a listed building that was just sitting there empty.
Yeah. And
I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to approach it. So it would have been to start earlier. I must have been 18, 19. I must have been about 19 then. If I'd started then, whoa, where would I be now?
Yeah.
Crazy.
But it's interesting when you look back now, you think, actually, I could have started sooner, because now that you've been through the process, you think maybe it was scary, but not as scary as you thought.
Yeah.
When you started, you think, actually, I could have done that earlier. I didn't have to wait so long to do that. And that's often the case with many things when we're looking to start something brand new, difficult. We build it all up in our mind. It's going to be this, it could be that. And it's a big, scary monster, but actually, when you do it, it's not that bad.
You get through it.
Why did I put it off?
I think the key to everything in any kind of success in anything is just perseverance.
Yes.
That is it. I whittled that down a while ago. It's just don't stop. Whatever you do, just keep going.
Yes.
And sometimes it gets hard in a deal. You get deal fatigue and it gets tough, but you just got to keep pushing through. And eventually something will work. Maybe you have to pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'd say dream bigger and start sooner.
Okay.
Bigger goals sooner.
So as a final question then, in terms of somebody watching or listening to this right now, thinking about maybe going into developments, they don't have any experience, what would you say to someone like that who's got no experience looking to do bigger developments?
I would say do what I did. Bring the value by finding a site first, do the legwork, pull a team together, find something that you understand would be suitable for development. And how you get to that point is you've got to do some research and work out the areas. Find someone to partner up, find someone more experienced than you to partner up with, and then you're off.
Yes. So you bring value to the table,
Bring
and
value.
you de-risk it for other people that you are bringing, and which is why somebody would want to work with you then. So it is
100%.
possible. It's a case of you just need to bring those right pieces to the puzzle.
Because otherwise there's no incentive for them to work with you.
Yeah.
Why would they JV with you?
Yes.
They're not going to come. No one in that position is going to find someone that hasn't got anything going yet and go, I'm going to partner with you.
Yeah.
It makes
It's
no
a risk.
sense.
It's a high risk for them.
It's high risk, but there's no real value. They'll just do it themselves, or they'll partner with somebody else that has more experience. So that's how you get in. The way you get in is bring some value. And in my opinion, it's go and get a site, go and find a development site. If you want to do big developments, find a potential site, do the legwork, get the feasibility done from the architect, do an appraisal, work it out, speak to agents and everyone else to find out what the values would be. Bring a deal fully presented to this potential developer or investor and say, here's the deal I've got, here's the address, here's the site. Ideally, you want to have secured the site because you're at risk if that,
Yeah, don't get the rug pulled under your feet.
you don't want to get screwed over by that same person you're talking to. It can happen, or whoever else you're showing the deal to. Do the feasibilities first, secure the site, and then take that full package to a partner, a potential partner, and say, here's this deal I've got. Here's the architect's feasibility. Here are the numbers. Here's the investment required. Here's the work required. I'm willing to do the work.
Yes.
And do you want in? And as you've secured the site, which you should have secured it, ideally, they can't then go and do the deal without you.
Yeah.
So either they don't. This is what I did. So on one deal I had, no, the first deal I went out to. So when I did a deal with that client, I'd probably spoken to about 4 different people.
Okay.
Everyone that I'd met through my lettings
to come on
business,
board with you.
to come on board.
Okay.
Some of the offers are terrible.
As they see you're in a weak position, they're trying to take advantage.
I think potentially advantage, but I just think that was the term of the deal they wanted, and those terms didn't work for me. I wanted to do a 50-50 deal, and then at some point they put the money, more money than I do. And some people that doesn't work for.
Yes.
My business partner on that first deal has done extremely well out of it. He's multiple 7 figures.
Yes, you've made him very rich. And
well, he was already rich, to be fair. So, but that's another key thing. If you partner with someone that's already got success,
yes,
it helps.
It rubs off.
If you want to do a deal and you're trying to, if you're doing a deal that requires 500 grand, in my opinion, pulling together loads of people, they've got 50, they've got 25, they've got 100. I think that's a high risk approach. And I think you're creating a lot of work for yourself because there's a lot of people that are going to hold you to account. The person who has 2 million quid, they'll be on your back a lot less, usually. And they're a lot more sophisticated, usually. And so doing a deal with somebody like that can also give you some guidance if that's required because of where you're starting at. You're in a much better position doing it that way.
That's really good advice. Anthony, thank you so much.
Lovely.
It's been a pleasure catching up with you.
It's been a while. It's good.
It has.
Good
We won't
seeing
leave
you
it so long
this
next time.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.